Ukraine's unexpected victory in Pokrovsk, December 18th, 2025. You heard that right. After nearly 2 years of just grinding relentless pressure in Donetsk, the strategic hub of Pokrovsk just saw a massive, completely unexpected reversal of fortunes. And if you're looking for the sharpest, most in-depth analysis on military strategy, global defense, and these kinds of technological shifts, subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex. Join me with Aria for this latest deep dive by Defense Report. We are offering a sharp, no-nonsense breakdown of the strategic developments that have, suddenly ripped the initiative right out of Russian hands on the Eastern Front. For months, Pokrovsk, that crucial logistics hub in Donetsk, has been under just relentless pressure.
Constant.
But now, Ukrainian forces have achieved a significant, really a stunning reversal, retaking huge swaths of territory. So we're going to unpack exactly what tactical genius led to this turnaround and, crucially, what this all means for the deadlocked peace negotiations taking place right now.
The significance here, it's really hard to overstate. Pokrovsk isn't just another town on the map. It has been the anchor of Ukrainian logistics in the entire region, and it's been under this sustained Russian assault for well over 17 months.
17 months.
Yeah. And then Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrskyi's announcement on December 17th delivered the immediate, just stunning statistic. Ukrainian forces regained 72 square kilometers total.
72 square kilometers in one maneuver. I mean, that is not an incremental gain. That's a major operation.
It absolutely is. And to break that down for you, 16 of those square kilometers were regained in northern Pokrovsk itself, which is where the heaviest, most brutal urban fighting was.
Okay.
But the other 56 square kilometers were recaptured near the neighboring settlements of Hryshyn, Kotlin, and Udakne. And this western arc is so critical because those areas feed the supply lines into that main Pokrovsk-Mirnorod pocket.
So they didn't just push them back. They secured their own logistics.
Exactly. It's a clear demonstration that Ukraine can still seize and hold the initiative in a sector where Russia had been advancing, mile by punishing mile.
Okay, so let's unpack this tactical reversal. Before December, the reports were painting a pretty grim picture. Russian forces were closing in. What was the operational status in Pokrovsk right before this breakthrough?
The Russian objective was crystal clear: create a pocket. They were attacking primarily on the western outskirts of Pokrovsk, trying to cut the main route, and they were significantly ramping up pressure on the city of Mirnorod, which is just to the east.
And if Mirnorod fell?
Pokrovsk would have been virtually surrounded. You'd have just a narrow, really exposed neck of land left for logistics. The defense was stretched incredibly thin.
So if they were that close to encircling the area, what specific battlefield actions proved to the world that the momentum had shifted? We need that concrete operational evidence you're showing the Russian collapse.
Well, the evidence really centers on a series of just crushing mechanized losses for the Russian side. The most definitive action was confirmed on December 11th, the complete destruction of an entire Russian armored convoy.
An entire convoy.
An entire convoy, attempting a large-scale mechanized thrust. When you destroy a whole convoy, that's not just a localized failure, it signals a fundamental breakdown in their coordination and protection.
Right.
And we have specific figures for a related engagement that happened just the day before, on December 10th. An armored convoy moving along the crucial M30 Salytov-Pokrovsk highway got hit.
The main artery.
Precisely. That one engagement resulted in the verified loss of at least 8 armored vehicles and over 49 personnel. And when you think that Russian losses across the entire front are already stratospheric, which we'll get to later, losing 8 vehicles in a single localized push just makes sustaining that assault impossible.
This raises a fascinating question then. How did the Ukrainians achieve this kind of localized dominance? We've heard for months about how drone warfare favors the defense. Was this just superior artillery, or did technology play a decisive role here?
This is where the technological adaptation becomes the key insight now. The Ukrainian tactic was a masterful combination of existing heavy weapons and novel technology. The 95th Air Assault Brigade, an incredibly effective unit, was instrumental here.
Okay.
They successfully halted these Russian mechanized assaults, specifically those by elements of the 76th VDV Division. And for those unfamiliar, that's Russia's elite parachute-trained airborne forces.
So they stopped a premier Russian unit cold. How?
They used pre-sighted artillery zones, which just means the coordinates were pre-calculated for maximum efficiency, and then, and this is the crucial part, they saturated these zones with FPV drone swarms the moment the weather cleared.
So it was a combined arms attack, but with a 21st century twist.
Exactly. The VDV units were hit by rapid, coordinated, cheap precision strikes from the drones, simultaneously with overwhelming traditional fire support. That FPV drone swarm, used with heavy artillery, proved to be an overwhelming counter to the heavily armored advance.
That dynamic takes us straight into the core challenge here. For months, the entire defense of Pokrovsk was being dictated by Russia's drone dominance, not just their ground troops. This victory implies Ukraine has found a replicable counter. So, remind us, what was that specific Russian strategy that had been strangling Pokrovsk?
The Russian advance toward Pokrovsk, it wasn't just a 21-month ground campaign. Its success in the months right before this was enabled by a dedicated 5-month campaign of what's called battlefield air interdiction, or BAI.
Let's define BAI for our listeners because it's a concept that really explains why this whole sector was suffering so much.
Right, so BAI means using air power, and in this context, we're talking specifically about specialized reconnaissance and strike drones to strike targets in the near rear, usually 25 to 100 kilometers behind the active front line.
So not the trenches, but the people supplying the trenches.
Precisely. Russia's goal wasn't just to deny the frontline positions, it was to disrupt, delay, and ultimately starve the entire defensive effort by choking off all the logistics channels.
And their targeting was highly specific, I take it.
Very. They focused intensely on Ukrainian ground lines of communication, or GLOCs, so the roads and trails used for moving everything from ammo to food, using elite units like the Rubicon Center for Advanced Unmanned Technologies. These units targeted logistics vehicles, crucial drone operator positions, and even launch sites up to 50 kilometers from the front.
And what was the immediate, painful consequence of that successful BAI campaign on the Ukrainian defenders on the ground?
It just created logistical absurdity and immense human strain. These persistent drone strikes meant troops had to stop using vehicles entirely in certain areas. We saw reports that servicemen were having to walk 10 to 15 kilometers just to reach their positions.
10 to 15 kilometers.
On
On foot. With gear.
On foot, with gear and supplies. Imagine the impact on reinforcement and timely supply flow into that Pokrovsk-Mirnorod pocket when every single soldier is forced to become a foot messenger. So overcoming that and then achieving this kind of dominance with their own FPD swarms is a profound technological and operational leap.
It also offers a vital physical counter-narrative to the Kremlin's core messaging, which is all about the inevitable collapse of Ukrainian defenses.
Oh, absolutely. What's fascinating in the cognitive warfare context is how Russia weaponizes these tiny tactical gains. They'll take a small settlement like Chasiv Yar or Kurkov, maybe 10 square kilometers, and use it to proclaim that the eventual fall of much larger cities like Pokrovsk is guaranteed.
And Pokrovsk is much, much larger.
It's 23 square kilometers and had a pre-war population of 60,000. So this 72 square kilometer counter-maneuver is just a clear, powerful rebuttal. It proves that technological innovation and tactical competence can, and often do, trump the narrative of overwhelming and inevitable Russian force.
And the good news wasn't just isolated to Donetsk. We saw simultaneous success coming out of the northern front near Kupiansk, which is another area Russia claimed was practically theirs.
That's right. If Pokrovsk was the southeastern success story, Kupiansk was the northern one. Ihor Obolensky of the Kartia Corps reported on December 12th that Russian forces in Kupiansk were, and I'm quoting here, completely cut off, and that his unit had liberated key...
It flies directly in the face of what we heard from Moscow just last month.
Completely. This Kupiansk reversal is a perfect example of how rapid battlefield shifts can immediately debunk Russian information operations. It was only on November 4th when President Putin himself claimed that Kupiansk was practically in the hands of Russian forces.
So if we look at the assessment from independent analysts, what did this reversal confirm for them?
Well, the Institute for the Study of War, among others, assessed that this success fundamentally debunks the Kremlin's narrative of inevitable victory. It just exposes the exaggerated claims of progress that Putin was pushing right up to November 27th. The operational reality was that even before this latest push, Ukrainian forces had Russian supply routes in northern Kupiansk under effective fire control, and when you combine fire control with maneuver, you get isolated cutoff forces. It just demonstrates the strategic brittleness behind all of Moscow's boasting.
And yet, even with these clear successes in Pokrovsk and Kupiansk, the Ukrainian General Staff still lists both sectors as experiencing the most difficult situations on the front. That detail is key, isn't it? It shows that victory doesn't mean the pressure just vanishes.
It just means the momentum has been temporarily reversed. That's the nature of this war. These are significant, hard-won victories, but they are localized wins within an incredibly brutal, attritional war of position. The overall strategic balance remains very dynamic.
And that attritional nature, amplified now by these unexpected Ukrainian battlefield wins, directly impacts the diplomatic arena. If Ukraine can prove it can still seize the initiative, what pressure does that put on the ongoing high-stakes peace negotiations?
It massively solidifies Kyiv's negotiating position. The reason these victories matter so much on the diplomatic table is that Russia continues to maintain this maximalist stance, one that these tactical losses make harder and harder to justify. Putin himself just reiterated this on December 17th.
What did he say?
He insists Russia will undoubtedly achieve its war goals, which means, achieving the original aims of demilitarization and denazification.
So, still demanding unconditional surrender, essentially, a complete collapse of Ukrainian sovereignty.
And beyond that, Russia continues to push this idea of seizing all of its historical lands. This rhetoric routinely goes way beyond the 4 annexed oblasts. Kremlin officials have repeatedly signaled aims stretching all the way to Odessa. These maximalist demands are, for Moscow, non-negotiable.
And how has Moscow reacted to the peace proposals that are circulating? The U.S. 28-point plan, the European counterproposal?
They're rejecting both of them outright if they don't grant these aims. Russian presidential aide Yuri Ushakov was very clear on December 14th. Russia will not discuss certain territorial issues, and they specifically rejected creating a demilitarized buffer zone in Donbass. They are demanding victory before negotiating.
Which is exactly why these battlefield reversals are so crucial.
Precisely.
Okay, so let's contrast this with the European and Ukrainian position, which seems to be hardening. Kyiv refuses to cede territory, especially that fortress belt in Donbass. But what were the key distinctions in that European counterproposal that signaled a stronger resolve?
The European draft was really designed to directly counter Russia's rhetorical goals. First, it firmly states that Ukraine's sovereignty will be reconfirmed, which is a direct slap at Putin's insistence that Ukraine isn't a real country.
Right.
Second, the military capacity guarantees were significantly higher. It sets the cap for Ukraine's peacetime forces at 800,000 personnel, compared to the U.S. draft's 600,000. It acknowledges the long-term need for a robust defense.
And most importantly, on the territorial question.
The European territorial settlement starts negotiations at the current line of contact. It refuses to endorse Russia's current games as some kind of precondition for peace. This ensures that any negotiation has to address the invasion itself, rather than just codifying its results. But the key issue for Ukraine, the true sticking point, it remains security guarantees.
Of course. The lesson of 2014 and 2022 is that paper promises are, well, not enough.
They're insufficient, exactly. Reliable, robust security guarantees are the key issue for Ukraine, and Russia is publicly rejecting providing anything durable. That refusal just reinforces the assessment that any supposed short-term Russian concessions they might float would be purely tactical.
Just a way to buy time.
A way to buy time, to rearm, and to try again. Not a fundamental shift away from their long-standing goal of controlling Ukraine's destiny. Without ironclad security guarantees, the fighting will inevitably resume.
This whole conflict is a testament to the immense cost of attrition. And while Ukraine pays a heavy toll, these recent battles really quantify the catastrophic cost for the aggressor.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the sheer scale of the Russian commitment versus their losses.
The numbers are just staggering. Russia has concentrated up to 710,000 troops for strategic offensive operations across Ukraine.
710,000.
And yet, the losses are immense and unsustainable. We saw a near-record 1,740 casualties reported on December 17th alone, the same day Syrskyi announced the Pokrovsk victory. Throughout 2025, the average monthly casualty rate for Russian personnel has been hovering around 34,600.
34,000 a month. Belousov's recruitment efforts must be constantly playing catch-up just to replace the dead and wounded.
They are. And the material costs, especially in sectors like Pokrovsk, are equally staggering. Russia is losing armored vehicles and tanks at what most analysts consider an unsustainable rate for long-term projection.
Can you give us a figure on that?
Just in November, across the front, Russia lost over 70 tanks and more than 157 armored fighting vehicles. This constant degradation of material means that even if Russia has more manpower to throw into the fight, they increasingly lack the high-quality armored vehicles needed for these big mechanized thrusts.
Which is exactly what the 95th Air Assault Brigade capitalized on near Pokrovsk.
Exactly what they capitalized on.
The Russian response to these setbacks, though, has been to double down on escalation against civilian infrastructure, which has, in turn, triggered a powerful European response.
We continue to see that state terror. Russia maintains its air campaign targeting Ukrainian energy infrastructure, specifically hitting major cities like Odessa and Zaporizhia, leading to massive blackouts and declarations of a state-level energy emergency in some regions. This constant targeting of civilians is a clear signal that the strategic goal is still to break Ukraine's will.
And Europe's response has become far more aggressive in the financial sphere.
Yes. Europe is putting immense economic pressure on the Kremlin now. On December 12th, the EU took the critical step to indefinitely freeze $210 billion, that's about $246 billion, in immobilized Russian central bank assets.
Wow.
And this isn't just symbolic. It moves the EU one step closer to potentially using those funds to finance Ukraine's reconstruction and war effort. It is a clear message of unified European resolve. The financial cost for Russia is only just beginning.
The unexpected victory in Pokrovsk is not just a tactical success. It is physical proof that Ukraine can still seize the initiative, not just locally, but technologically, making it exponentially harder for Putin to sell his maximalist demands at the negotiating table, regardless of the propaganda he's spitting in Moscow. So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? If Ukraine can continue to innovate tactically, defeating sophisticated drone strategies while simultaneously inflicting unsustainable attrition on Russia, does the Kremlin truly have a path forward that doesn't involve radical concessions? That is the question the world is waiting for Moscow to answer. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex Sanaria, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. Folks, subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.